today by talking about your assignment for Friday. This is actually a newspaper article from the early 1900s, and it's regarding the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. I would liken this event back then to 9/11 today. It was that big of an event. It was obviously a clothing factory, and it was built to last. You'll notice that during the industrial age, they are building out of steel and out of bricks, so that if you have an earthquake or a fire, the building won't come down. Well, the building was fine in the fire. In fact, it stood. The problem is it burned everybody and everything in it. And it was a clothing factory. And unfortunately, they didn't want workers to be able to go out and get a smoke break or just breathe air for a while. So they locked all of the exits other than the front exit. So these people were trapped in there, and they killed all these women and children because children were allowed to work in a factory back then at a very young age. So it made a huge impact on the rules of factories and all that kind of stuff. So I know that it's kind of shrunk down. You don't need to read every single word, but here's what you're going to do. This is all basically front back about this event. It's interviewing different people that were there and all that fun stuff. Here's what you're going to do for Friday. I want you to write down the W's and the H. So if you don't know those, make sure you have them in your planner or write them on your article. I don't care, whatever. You need to write down the who was involved, what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, why did it happen, and then how are the details. And under those details, I want you to make sure that you give us some very specific examples about the 5 senses. If I were there, what would I smell? What would I see? What would I feel? You know, think about what it would be like if you were there on that day. In fact, I think you're going to find there are some similarities with this to 9/11. Some very similar things happen. I'll just say that. Let's see if you can find out what it is. Okay? So basically, I'm looking for 10 things on Friday. The W's and the H, and under the H, I want 5 senses. Okay? So just look for that. You can skim. I bet you could do this in 10 minutes. It's not going to be that hard. Okay? All right, so that's your homework. All right, to start out class today, I want you to take a look at this picture. This is a picture of one of the big cities in America right around 1900. Could be New York, Chicago, any of those big cities. What do you notice about the inner city life at this time? What do you see? Okay, not many vehicles compared to today. What else? Horses. And we do have a mix of horses and vehicles, don't we? What else? I heard some. Lots of people, very crowded. In fact, a lot of times they would actually rent out an apartment for 2 different families or 3 families. So let's just say like these 2 families are sharing the same apartment, and you guys would go and work in the factory from this time to this time while they slept, and then you would go work in the factory while they slept in the same apartment. You know, 10 people in a tiny apartment, crazy stuff like that. Mitch, what do you see? A lot of big buildings. They don't have a lot of room to go this way, but they're starting to go up because of the invention of steel. Yes, steel is a new invention, so they start doing some of that. It doesn't mean they're all safe, but they're starting to experiment. Anything else? What about lights? Do they have lights? Do we see any street lights? Not yet. Now, they would have lamps out on the street that a person would go around with these really tall, like, what do you call it? Stilts, yeah. And they would go and they would light all of the different lamps. We're starting to get there. You know, Edison is starting to figure out things with the light bulb. But the cities are pretty old. In cities like this, you could smell it if the wind was right at least 10 miles away. Because you would go to the bathroom in a chamber pot that sat next to your bed, and in the morning you would dump it out in the street. Wouldn't that be gross? Poop and pee and everything all over the street. Of course, the horses are piddling everywhere. So, yep. It might. I'm sure that it happened at some point, no doubt. So it was kind of a smelly place too. It really was. Very dark in a lot of areas. I mean, imagine. You guys ever been at your house when the electricity goes out? Isn't it weird to go without electricity for us? You know, you light some candles, but man, you go to warm something up in the microwave and it doesn't work. or you go to flip on the light when you go to the bathroom and there's no windows in there. We don't have any windows. That always surprises me, stuff like that. So that's kind of what it was like. So today we're going to talk about the city, and we're going to talk about what it was like for you immigrants. You played those roles, right? What it was like once they got here. And let's take a look at that a little bit. Okay, so we're going to flip and go to a different set. Today we are going to specifically talk about political bosses, political machines, and Tammany Hall versus this guy right here, Thomas Nast. Now this is a cartoon of him. He was a cartoonist, but he's also very well known for his mustache. So you can see they're really exaggerating that gorgeous mustache there. So let's find out what all this means. All right, so you've just arrived in New York City, and this person shows up, okay? And he talks to you about this guy. Well, let's just use me as an example. I'm going to be your political boss today. So the political boss that's running the Democratic Party is Diann Terpstra. And I have these workers up here. These are my workers. Well, this group arrives from the ship from Ireland. And here comes Brady. And he says, dude, come with me, Brady. He's working for me, so I would be in my office. Brady comes up, shakes her hand. Dude, you're from Ireland. Dude, you're from Ireland. From Ireland. I was too. I know what it's like.
I know what it's like.
Hey, have you found a place to live yet? No. Tell you what, I got a place for you to stay. I even got a job for you. Wow, a job even. Sounded pretty good, huh, Mason? Yeah, pretty good. Now, what's the only stipulation, right? There's got to be an exception to the rule. The only thing you got to do is vote for Terpstra in the next election. Willing to do that? Okay. Because remember, most of you came, especially if you were third class, with $0, nothing on your body, right? So wow, a job. They're thinking America is rocking, man. A job, a place to live. America is truly a dream. Thank you, worker Brady. You're awesome. So all we ask is that he votes for me, right? Well, then, of course, it doesn't end there, does it? Something that's too good to be true usually is. So after he gets working and he gets settled, a week later, Mr. Erickson comes to check him out. He's my other worker. And he says, to help Terpstra win the election, we need some money. We need 10% of your paycheck this week. Yep, hand it over. Make him hand it over. Yep, all of you. You're all off the boat, living together. Yep. And then he collects every week. He collects a percentage of the money. Now, you're obviously not making a huge amount anyway, right? But he's starting to collect money, and I'm getting rich. That's exactly what political bosses are, and that's what they do. They get these people that are loyal to them. I pay them because they work for me, and I basically take advantage of these poor immigrants that come in off the boat. And you know what? It didn't end there. It's still around today. We just don't call it the same thing. There are people that take advantage of immigrants all the time. Thank you, worker Erickson. Very nice. So your political boss is the leader of a political party in one of the big towns of these poor immigrants, all right? AKA the man, as we would call it. The political machines are the organization that are around that political boss, okay? They command to get votes, to get money, and basically to control the city or the area, okay? The most famous of those political bosses, and by the way, that's AKA the machine, the group right here that works for the man. The group and the guy that are most famous for, oh, you need more time? Okay. There you go. The most famous guy that we found in this day was this guy right here in this cartoon. And that is a guy named Boss Tweed. William Boss Tweed. I don't know if you've heard that name before. And he ran the organization called Tammany Hall. This is the political machine. Tammany Hall was a Democratic Party in this case that had its headquarters in New York City. Boss Tweed was basically the guy that ran this headquarters. You'll notice he wasn't a governor. He was in charge of the party. But boy, he might as well have been, because he gets a lot of control. This is around the 1860s that he really becomes powerful. And they call it Tweed's Ring. That's why you see he and his buddies up here in the ring, Tweed's Ring, his cronies and him. Okay. And this is Boss Tweed. You'll recognize him in a lot of cartoons. Got a little bit of a bald head, a little chubby looking. Okay. So Boss's band, whoops, band of followers were known as the Tweed Ring. Doing okay? All right. So some questions for you. First of all, what immediate struggles would the immigrants face when they get off the boat in America? What are some things that they need to think about? Where are they going to live? They're thinking about home, about their family getting here. What else? Food, immediately. Jobs. Good. Anything else? Really, that's what you got to take care of right away when you get off the boat. Now, the hope is that when your ancestors came here, they had relatives that were already here. People like my great-grandparents came when they were 14 and 16, and they didn't have relatives. So they started by themselves. Imagine, I think about you moving to even another city in South Dakota by yourself and surviving. That scares me a little bit. Can you imagine going to a new country without anything and starting over? Do you know that when my husband and I moved to this town, Brandon, South Dakota, we moved here with either of us having a job? I look at that now and I think we were psycho, man. I would never do that today now that I have a kid. But back then I was like, psh, carefree, whatever, I'll get a job, whatever. Luckily someone liked me and I got a job, but whew, be scary. All right, so your second part of the question then, why would Boss Tweed care about the immigrants? What is his necessity? Why does he care about them? What does he want? You bet. They are desperate. So he can get money from them. He can get their votes. He can also get them to do whatever he wants quite often. Whether it's taking somebody out, beating somebody up, doing jobs that other people don't want to do usually. Okay? He kind of has control over that whole population. So let's take a look at how it worked and how they traded. I'm sure what the heck happened there? Okay. All right. So first of all, Tweed would give the immigrants a place to stay, a job, and basic necessities. In fact, they usually gave them a little stipend of money to get started. I mean, seriously, you're thinking, wow, America is the best place ever. Nobody did that for me in Ireland. So they think it's all good, but usually it's too good to be true. As a return then, the immigrants give them votes and a percent of their salary. And usually so much money that they end up never getting ahead, which is why so many immigrants stay right on that coast, because it takes a long time for them to get money to get out to the middle of the country. All good? So let's take a look at where all that money is going. Tweed made a lot of money through votes and corruption, of course. He had financial control through political control, and I'll show you what I mean by that. He is able to get rich through city contracts. He's in charge of the Democratic office. So, for example, he would hire a group to build a new park, for example. And then he would tell the people of New York that it cost this amount, when really it only cost a little bit, and then he would pocket the rest of the money for himself. So it's kind of tricky. He really deceived the people. Between this time period, we don't know exactly how much. We believe Tweed made between $30 to $200 million in New York City because of these contracts and all the money that he stole from his immigrants. He hid it pretty well. One of his best examples is the New York County Courthouse. He was in charge of building the New York County Courthouse. And let's take a look at what he did here. This is a picture of it. So, for example, A carpenter for 1 month was getting paid $360,000 to build this courthouse. Now, in today's rate, he would be getting paid $4.9 million. Is that how much a carpenter gets for 1 month of pay? Do any of you have carpenters for dads? No, not even close, right? You'd be awesome, but no. So in other words, all that extra money was going into his pocket. That's what he was doing. And he said to the people that it cost that much, but they just never really subtracted and figured out how much they were getting paid. Furniture contractor, 3 tables, 40 chairs, paid him $179,000. It cost $2.5 million to do that many tables and chairs. Again, ridiculous. The plasterer for 2 days got paid $1.83 million. And to print a report, a piece of paper, it cost $105,000 to do this building. So you can see he was really pocketing a lot of extra change when he did this job. Little sneak that he was. So the question is, what happened to him? He was taken down, man. Thomas Nast, our cartoonist, is the guy that did it. Those of you that are artists, I'm telling you what, you have power. There is power in the colored pencil, crayon, marker, whatever it is you draw with. Because I'm telling you what, he did it. He did it. Thomas Nast was very well known for a couple of different things. It is because of him that we see Santa Claus the way we do today, because he was the first to draw Santa like this in America. He also is the guy that did, I think it's on my next thing here. Oh, it's on another slide. He's also the one that did like the elephant and the donkey for the Republican and Democrat parties. That's why we have that. And of course, he starts turning his eye to Tweed. And he sees what Tweed is doing, so he starts drawing cartoons about what he's doing to the people. So like this one is a really famous one. You'll see Tweed here, and of course he's got that little bag of money for a head, showing that he's stealing all this money and getting rich. What is interesting is Thomas Nast cannot read or write. He actually dropped out of school at a younger age, but boy, could he draw. Now, why do you think a cartoonist would be more effective than an editorial? Think about the people of the day. Exactly. And you know what? Boss Tweed knew it. He said, you know what? I don't care what they write about me, but will you quit drawing the pictures? Because so many of us were immigrants around 1900, 1800s, that they couldn't read. Didn't matter. But we all could look at that picture and get an idea of what it meant. So he was actually damaged much more from a cartoon than from an article. Kind of neat. So actually, this is a quote from him. Boss Tweed said, "Stop those pictures. I don't care so much what the papers say about me. My constituents don't know how to read, but they can't help seeing those darn pictures." So believe it or not, Boss Tweed actually tries to bribe Thomas Nast. He tries to pay him $50,000, which is 100 times the guy's salary at that time, but Nast refuses. He chooses to do the right thing, which a lot of people didn't in New York City. So that was a very rare thing, and he took him down. He did. He destroyed the man. So, due to Nast cartoons, like this one here, you'll see. Let's find out what happens. First of all, Tweed's corruption was uncovered, showed all the illegal things he was doing. He was put in prison. But it didn't end there. He used his money, paid somebody off in prison, and escaped, and he fled to Cuba. But again, Thomas Nast was the guy that was the savior of the day. Because of these pictures, the people in Cuba recognized him, and they turned him into the authorities, and he was put back in prison. Actually, by this time, he was in Spain. He had gone from Cuba to Spain. So Nast pictures turned him in again. Tweed was brought back and put in jail, and he actually died in jail in 1878. So let's take a look at one of those cartoons, and let's decipher it a little bit, because on your test, there will be a couple of cartoons. So have we practiced anything in here with cartoons yet in American? I know we did some in World, so. Okay, So here's what I tell my students to do. It's a really easy way to decipher a political cartoon. The first thing you want to do is circle or highlight any of the W's, the basics. Who, what, when, where. Don't worry about the whys or hows, just the basics. So do you see any of those things on here? Any words? We see. Okay, we see the name of the artist, which can sometimes tell us what country they're from. It might even say the city down there. Sometimes they even list the year, so that would be a clue. What else? In front, can you tell them there's some other words on it? Yeah, there's New York on the arm of this guy he's standing on. And there's some other words here that are pretty hard to see on the skulls and the bones. Okay. Sometimes there'll be a title on it. Looks like we don't have one with this one. But you find any of those W's first. Okay? Then we try to figure out who are the main characters. Who are the characters in this? Obviously. Tweed. Yep. Here's Boss Tweed and his assistants, right? His cronies, the ring, right? Okay. How does he portray them? How does he portray Boss Tweed? As what? A vulture, yes. Good. Portrays him as a vulture. And same thing with his assistants, basically, right? They're picking at the bones of these people, okay? And then obviously, because she said, this says New York, they're picking at the bones of New York then, right? Picking at the people that have nothing, but he takes it, right? So then you go down to the big questions. What do you think this picture means? Who wants to tackle it? He is stealing from the people of New York. Good. So I always double check and I ask myself, how does the artist feel about the character? What do you think? Does he agree with this or not? He agrees that he should be stealing? No, he does not. He doesn't like him, does he? So he would be anti-Tweed. Yeah. And that always kind of helps you know, like which side they're on, how they're portraying them. Get the idea? And obviously we've already talked about this. Why is this important for illiterates? Because they can obviously use pictures. Okay? Make sense? We'll practice a few more later on too. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do next, those of you at home, I'm sorry you're going to miss this, but we're going to show you a little movie clip from the movie Far and Away. Do you remember when we showed you the land rush in Oklahoma? Well, we're going to go back in the movie to when they first arrived in America, because just like most of our immigrants, they didn't just come to Oklahoma immediately. They got here, they had $0. In fact, you know, the boy has nothing from Scotland. The woman is rich, but all she had, because she ran away, was a set of her parents' silverware. So she's going to sell that silverware to make money, and you'll see what happens when they get off the boat.